Hello everyone, I wanted to share something with all of you that has recently become quite clear to me in my understanding of how people build their relationships with one another more precisely, about our boundaries and our expectations. What do I mean by boundaries? It's what you and I consider acceptable or unacceptable in life in general or in relation to you specifically. How should or shouldn't a person behave? These are our principles. We all have principles. What I mean by expectations is what you and I hope to get from our relationships with other people. Maybe it's a spouse, a friend, your child, or a parent. Expectations and boundaries, they are very closely, intimately connected. Incorrect expectations inevitably lead to the formation of inappropriate boundaries. Flawed boundaries or principles create flawed expectations. We all live in a world of boundaries. Boundaries in raising children, boundaries in relationships with a spouse, boundaries we set for ourselves. Without them, it's impossible to exist. It's normal to live by principles. Everyone has principles. But what happens when these boundaries, these principles, are not correctly established? When the expectations that we place on others turn out to be nothing more than an illusion? A wise man once said that before you decide to remove or tear down a fence, you should really take a moment to consider why it was put there in the first place. Not all restrictions are bad. Some fences are not there to limit us, but rather to keep us safe. There are good principles and there are not so good ones. Well, how to differentiate one from the other? That's a completely separate discussion. The actual problem, you see, truly arises with our principles or with our personal boundaries, when these boundaries are not adequately justified, especially for the individuals with whom we frequently interact, when these very boundaries and principles prove to be inadequate or simply irrational. Such boundaries can become a source of great pain and conflicts. Let's take parenting. There's a so-called Japanese method of raising children. Yes, children aren't forbidden anything up to a certain age. They're given complete freedom. Then restrictions are gradually introduced. It sounds great, but in reality, it doesn't work. A child is 1 or 3 years old with broad boundaries. By age 6 or 9, parents begin to notice something is wrong and begin to tighten the boundaries. By age 10 or 13, a child accustomed to freedom feels like being confined, feels like being suffocated. And at 14 and 15 years old, when the personality is formed and the teenager strives for independence, an explosion, a rebellion, an uprising occurs. Many child psychologists propose a different model to give a child well-defined and clear boundaries at the very beginning of life and then gradually expand them as they grow older. They argue that by doing so, you help shape a confident personality. The goal is to, by 13 or 15, bring your child to a state where you can say, I've given you everything I could. Now I believe in you. You are capable of making the right choices. This principle within certain limits works not only in parenting. In business, the more precisely a contract is written, the fewer conflicts there are. In relationships, the more clearly expectations are discussed, the stronger the foundation. All problems and disappointments we experience are linked to undefined expectations. We enter into relationships with a certain image in our heads of the person with whom we are building this relationship. We fall in love not with a real person, but with an image we ourselves have created. We project onto this image all our hopes and expectations, our limitations and our principles. But then we inevitably discover that the real person is actually quite different from what we imagined. And this leads to deep disappointment, significant pain, and often bitter conflicts. Now let's consider the most crucial point of all. Just imagine for a moment that your personal boundaries or your expectations are represented by a circle. In our minds, this circle is perfect, even smooth, ideal. We think our expectations, principles, and boundaries are objective and correct. But in reality, this circle is far, far from perfect. Some parts of it are convex, some are concave. We establish boundaries in accordance with our preferences, our habits, and sometimes our purely egoistic impulses. We believe that these boundaries are objective, but in reality, all of this is deeply, profoundly subjective. And here's the crucial point. The person with whom we are building a relationship, whether it's a spouse, a child, a parent, or a friend, also possesses their own imperfect circle, their own unique expectations, their own distinct boundaries, their own particular bumps and hollows. And when two imperfect circles, when they come into contact naturally, there will be friction, there will be jolts, impacts, and inconsistencies. So what is the answer? It's simple on the one hand, but complex. Onward, humility. We must at least begin to understand that our boundaries and expectations are imperfect. They are not objective. And with this humility and understanding, approach every relationship in our lives. I approach my relationships with my wife or my child with the conscious realization, with the understanding that I am not perfect. My expectations are sometimes right, sometimes not, and sometimes I don't even know which ones. But I am willing to change. I'm prepared to reevaluate my own boundaries and ready to acknowledge that my perspective isn't perfect. This isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of maturity. It's a willingness to build relationships not based on the illusion of my own infallibility, but on an honest recognition of my own imperfections. And in this, I see the very beginning of true intimacy. I want to thank you all for your kind attention. May God bless you. Bye.